Hey, what's up guys, Brandon Washington here, and in today's video we're going to be taking a look at my full review over the Canon 1DX Mark II and why I think it is the best camera for professional and aspiring videographers and filmmakers. Alright, so guys, like I mentioned before, we're going to be taking a look at the Canon 1DX Mark II. Now, I bought this camera a few months ago, and a couple months ago I put out my initial thoughts around this camera. So if you haven't seen that video, definitely check that out. But I also wanted to come out and put out a full review. After having this camera for a few months, it's allowed me to take it on numerous of jobs, and I've gotten kind of a real world sense of what this camera is all about, what it's good for, what it's not good for, and ultimately kind of a better understanding of how to use this thing. Now, if you guys missed that video, I want to briefly just run over the specs of this camera so that way we can get those things out of the way. So first, this camera shoots in 4K at up to 60 frames per second. Now, to be fair, when this camera does shoot in 4K, it is a slightly cropped 4K, but in my honest opinion, it hasn't really made a major difference in at least my workflow. Now this camera also shoots in 1080p at 24, 30, 60, and then a very beautiful 120 frames per second. Now, whenever it does shoot in 120 frames per second, it is also good to note that that is also cropped, and there's no audio recorded whenever you're shooting at 120 frames per second. Now, personally, I don't really think I'd ever use any audio, recorded at 120 frames per second. But it's just important for me to let you guys know, if you guys ever do shoot at 120 frames, you will not get any audio. Now, I know I also said that this is primarily me telling you guys why I think it is an amazing camera for videographers and filmmakers, but it is really good for me to at least point out that this is by far the best photography camera I've ever shot with. And so if you are a filmmaker, videographer who might actually do some photography here and there, then it is important for you to know that this is an amazing camera, and I guarantee you it will never let you down. So if you find yourself ever shooting in 4K or at 1080 at 120 frames per second, it is really important to know that this camera does technically take a CFast card and a CF card, which are totally different cards. But if you are going to be shooting in 4K or 120 frames per second, you're pretty much going to only be able to shoot on a CFast card. CF cards just don't work. They're not fast enough, and normally you'll be able to find yourself only recording for a few seconds at best. So it is good if you are planning on getting this camera to start looking at some CFast cards, because that's really going to be where you want to invest your money long term. So don't waste your time on CF cards. Go ahead and invest in CFast cards early. Alright, so now that we've gotten some of the video logistics kind of out of the way, let's actually jump into this full review. What do I really think about this camera? Well, first I want to talk to you guys about the things that I love about this camera. And it all starts with the picture. The video that comes out of this camera is just amazing. Most of the time I find myself not actually even having to color correct or make any changes to the color, because Canon has always been well known for their color science, and this camera does not drop the ball whatsoever. Legitimately, I have actually gone out and shot stuff with this camera, got the look I wanted in camera, and then just cut it and exported it. I didn't have to do any color correction, and I will tell you that that is probably the #1 thing I like about this camera, is because it saves me so much time on the edit. The other thing I like about this camera is how heavy duty it is. I have taken this camera pretty much everywhere. I've shot in the rain with this camera. I've shot, in the middle of basically what feels like a desert where there's tons of dirt and debris flying everywhere. I shot in the middle of a hurricane with this camera. Taken it backstage at concerts, shot weddings. I mean, the list goes on and on and on, and this camera holds its own. It's one of the first times where I legitimately feel like with this camera, no matter what the job is that someone calls me to do, whether that's a commercial gig, whether that's a live event, whether that's, just shooting some stuff for my family around the house, this camera legitimately can hold its own, and especially when you pair it with the right lenses. I mean, this is a professional camera, and so you're not going to want to put cheap lenses on here. But if you do find yourself putting some L series lenses on this camera that are weather sealed, and this camera body is also weather sealed, you legitimately can take this anywhere. So if you're at a pool party, obviously you're not going to want to submerge this camera. It's not completely waterproof, but it is weather resistant. So if you're dealing with slight splashes and things like that, you'll be perfectly okay. And trust me, I've had to deal with that in the past, and this camera is still going. Now, another area that I really like about this camera is the battery life. The battery life on this thing is phenomenal. I have shot full days, like legitimately going from early in the morning, like 8 o'clock, and then shooting to almost like 2 o'clock in the morning the following day, and legitimately only went through 3 batteries. And that's in a full day non-stop shooting. It is phenomenal how great these batteries are. Now, these are specific for the 1DX. I've had people reach out to me since they know I've had the camera for a while, and they've asked me, like on Instagram, for example, you know, can you buy off-brand, or are there any knockoff batteries where you can save some money? And I will honestly say I have not found any knockoff batteries that are any good, and I really wouldn't recommend you get them. I mean, these camera batteries are workhorses, and they are definitely worth the price that you're gonna pay for them. So if you are looking for additional batteries for this thing, I definitely just recommend buy the Canon ones. You know, maybe you can get them on sale, but definitely buy the Canon ones because they are phenomenal. These are all great things about this camera, and trust me, I could go on and on and on about the things I love most about it, but I did want to touch on 3 little things that I did not like about this camera. Now, I know in my past video I had a few quirks, and I've pretty much worked out most of those, but there are still 3 things that I can't get over. The first is that this camera does not have built-in Wi-Fi. I would imagine for a camera of this price that it would have built-in Wi-Fi, but I would be wrong. There's actually a little adapter that you have to buy if you want to get Wi-Fi out of this camera, and that is if you just simply want to get pictures off your camera directly onto your phone. That is probably the worst thing about this camera, is that it does not have that Wi-Fi. Because I can't tell you how many times I've run into a situation where I take an awesome photo, I immediately want to get it on my phone so I can share it, but that in and of itself, especially when working with like a CFast card, which there's not very many CFast to cell phone readers, and when I say there's not many, I haven't found any, you know, that makes that process significantly longer and harder. So if there was Wi-Fi in this camera, it would just take this camera to that next level. But at this point, I haven't bought that adapter, so I'm just having to live without. Now, the next 2 things have to do with the screen. The first one is kind of minor, and that is the fact that it doesn't have a flip out screen. That makes filming yourself on this camera really difficult. I mean, being able to make sure that, you know, your composition is right, or making sure that you're in focus, it requires that you have an external monitor, and you know, for me, that's just an extra step, an extra piece that I don't really like. I would prefer this camera to have a flip out screen. It is not a deal breaker for me, especially because of how great the camera is in all the other areas, but that is something I would like to see on this camera. Now, the next thing about the monitor really does bother me, and that is that the touchscreen only works for certain things. For example, if you are shooting a video and you want to use the touchscreen to pull focus, then it works perfectly fine, and I love that feature. However, if you then want to go into the menu and use the touchscreen to be able to quickly get around the menus and find what you're looking for whatever reason, the touchscreen then doesn't work, and I don't know why they did this. I mean, if it's touchscreen, it should be a touchscreen throughout everything, and it should be very native. I can't tell you how many times for like the first couple weeks when I had this camera, I was accidentally tapping the screen in the menus, trying to get to certain places, and nothing was happening. And it's because, for whatever reason, whenever you're in the menus, your touchscreen just decides it doesn't want to work anymore. I have an 80D, and it has touchscreen, and it works for pulling focus, and it works in the menu. So I'm not really sure why they couldn't have brought that feature over onto this camera. Again, especially because of how much this camera costs. But, you know, at the end of the day, that also is not a huge deal breaker, obviously, because I'm going to keep the camera, but it is a huge bummer. So I guess with that being said, there is no perfect camera. Obviously, there's no one camera that has everything that we ever want, and unfortunately, if they ever did come out with that camera, it'd probably be way out of budget for most people. But I would say that this camera is probably the closest to that camera. This is an amazing camera. I can't recommend it enough. You know, when I first heard about the camera and saw a lot of people who had it, there was a ton of hype around this camera, and when I got it, I wanted to know, you know, like, is the hype real? Is it really worth it? And in my opinion, 100%. The hype is real. This camera is phenomenal. It is an amazing beast of a camera, and if you have the opportunity to pick one up, purchase one for yourself, I know personally you will not regret it. Now, I mentioned at the beginning of this video that, you know, I thought this was the best camera for videographers and filmmakers, professional and aspiring professionals. And the reason why I think that is because this is an amazing overall camera. You know, it doesn't matter what the job is, this camera will get it done. I've had clients in the past where I'm shooting a video for them and then they ask me, hey, can we get this one shot in just like really slow motion? And I can easily say, yeah, no problem. Let's shoot this at 120 frames in 1080p and it's gonna look gorgeous. Or I'll go into a certain shoot and somebody may say, hey, thank you so much for getting all these shots. Do you mind if we grab a couple quick photos? I just want to get some, you know, behind the scenes pictures, or I just want to get, you know, a couple really good images of X, Y, and Z. And this camera will not let you down in that area either. The other thing is, no matter if you're shooting in great lighting or even low lighting, I have found that this camera is phenomenal even in low light situations. So, you know, this is one of those cameras, in my opinion, that checks pretty much all the boxes when it comes to even maybe you not even knowing what exactly you're going to be shooting. So, yes, this is a very expensive camera. I definitely don't think everyone should go out and buy it because that could put a lot of people in a financial bind. But I will say that if you can get this camera, or if you are looking to be a professional or aspiring for that, this should definitely be a camera you should be thinking about working up to, because it will take your work to that next level. And I'm telling you, from the videos that I've already shot with it and the projects that I've put out, this camera won't let you down. But guys, that's it. Thanks for watching this video. If you thought it was helpful, make sure you smash that like button. Also, if you're new to the channel, consider hitting that subscribe button. This channel is all about helping you guys get better at your videos and photography. And so if you're into that kind of thing, make sure you subscribe. But until next time, I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.